see you guys in the dark.
Anyone who's lived in the suburbs may have that false sense of security that I had. I grew up in a rural suburbs, and most of my trauma was at school, or inflicted by an adult in my family, so my fear was far greater towards those that I knew than those I didn't. The story would be too long if I told everything, and likely deleted to kind of abuse that I suffered growing up at the hands of trusted family members. But it was bad enough to lead me to run away at 18. My parents had their demons and huge faults that they loved me and desperately tried to get me to move back home between my mom's prescription drug abuse, the draw of new love as a teenager, and shame of returning. I lived with an abusive man and his dad for about 6 years, 4 of which we were a couple. Too afraid to move back with my parents, I stayed and suffered this very physical and mental abuse, to the point in which my family watched in horror. As me and an adult, there wasn't anything that they could do. I tell you all this so that you can better understand why I let my ex's cousin stalk, torment, and very much hurt me. I was scared to turn to my parents, both in shame and fear of certain family members, and fear of being in trouble. I grew up with the fear of foster care lingering over my head, so I also had a fear of cops too. I was young, learning, and full of fear. It started after a Super Bowl party with my ex and his family. We will call ex John and his cousin Bob. I had just turned 18, freshly run away, and freshly in love, and a freshman in college. Despite running away, I still went to the college of my dreams till my ex and his cousin caused me to drop out 2 years in. I met my ex through a dating site. Old now, but it was called Plenty of Fish. I have video games put down as one of my hobbies, and that also brought plenty of guys. But my ex stood out as he wrote this long intro, 3 paragraphs of saying how he'd feel privileged to just be my friend if he could. I ate that up, being young, and he was a talented writer and speaker. He was good looking as well, but being raised by a narcissist single dad. Though smart, he was extremely manipulative, and I believed everything that he said, including, eventually, that I was ugly, dumb, and also no good. So I believed him when he said his cousin was a good person, and believed him when he said his cousin was harmless, believed him when he said he'd handle it and not go to the cops. His dad was a single parent who was well off as a big bank accountant at their corporate office, so the luxury was also blinding to the trap that I fell into, while my ex was a horrible person. His family was a blight, but his cousin was by far insane. Bob got a girl pregnant at 16 and was in a bit of trouble with the law as he was 28, but nothing an expensive lawyer couldn't handle apparently. This was not disclosed to me until long after. I met his cousin at a Super Bowl party. Obama had to be the president for a year, and this guy's political rant was overspilling into obvious racism, the type of guy that I avoided, though my ex had red flags. Bob had a sea of them that most couldn't miss. Obviously, he had anger issues from the beginning, but I obviously never guessed he was a predator. At halftime, he pulled me down into his lap, grabbed my phone, and put his name in my contacts as White Rabbit, then called himself. All while staring at my ex's family, and my ex to help me, they simply ignored me, even as I stormed off with tears afterwards. No one asked if I was okay, just acted like it didn't even happen. Little did I know the barrage of text messages I'd get the following day. The ones that stood out to me were telling me my ex was a bad boyfriend, and that I should break up with him. The one that made me disgusted was, "Do you know why I put my name as White Rabbit?" I didn't respond, so about 10 minutes later he says, "Because I fuck like a rabbit," and some racist reasons for the white part that has no good saying here. He would go into messaging me about, "I can't believe I met a real WoW gamer girl." This is how I even learned not only did he play WoW, but he was in my ex's guild with us. He'd been in jail for the past 6 months, and a week after I met him, he restarted his account on WoW, and would resume his talking on WoW too. It felt like there was no escape, and showing my boyfriend at the time the text messages and screenshots, all I got out of John was, He's harmless. He's like you. It's a good thing my family likes you. That was that month's worth of messages. Drunk rants and political rants filled my phone and WoW account. And it was kind of harmless, I guess. Till one day he showed up at my college a few days after my car was totaled by some idiot running a red light. And luckily I walked away with just a few cuts and a fractured rib from the seatbelt. He said he was there to give me a ride home because my ex was too busy to pick me up. I honestly didn't know what to think. I called my ex a bunch of times and texted, but he didn't respond, so at least it seemed my ex was truly too busy. I took this creep on his word and regretfully got in his truck. After the accident, I was rattled, and every car sound sent me on edge, and Dick had decided it would be funny to speed and drive like he was on Fast and the Furious, then pretend he lost control of the steering. After screaming and crying the whole way home, we finally get to the house, and he leans over to kiss me. I push him away, but this guy was like 6 foot something and 300 pounds, possibly more. With all the soreness from my cracked ribs and general muscle soreness from the accident, I had very little strength, let alone my 5 foot, 110 pound self. Couldn't stand a chance even without the accident. I know martial arts though. I'm not great at it, but grew up with it, was my nerdy older brother watching a lot of anime, thus enrolling into martial arts and dragged me along. Enough so I know, though. I lacked size and strength. I had the advantage of flexibility. Powering through the soreness, I was able to get free of his forceful hold and use my 1,000-pound backpack, obviously not that heavy, but definitely felt like it was lugging those college books around, and used the swinging weight of my backpack to throw off his weight advantage, just enough to shove him off of me, bust his lip, and get out of the truck. He proceeded to yell at me obscenities and stuff, and then he peeled off. As I got inside, my ex's dad was home, and surprising, he was sincere in asking what happened, and then apologized. Though a narcissist, his dad was good at showing face, even if it was probably fake empathy looking back. As a result, I was disarmed from calling the police. I walked upstairs to find my ex jerking it to his weird, gross fetish, and basically just hated myself so much after seeing all this happening, because my ex was just too busy. Fuck my life, right? I still get tears in my eyes remembering this stuff. My ex really did ask his cousin to come pick me up. So I blocked his cousin everywhere and focused on school, but it wasn't enough. He showed up a few months after this again at school. I had night classes as I worked at a local diner in the morning. He tried and talked to me, tell me that these radical theories about my ex, but looking back, honestly, some of them were true. I was too blinded by worse to see them. Regardless, I ignored him and kept walking till he got angry. Eventually, he escalated to yelling at me like a deranged rambling of a sore loser, calling me every name under the English language that he could think of. Luckily, despite it being dark, the campus was populated, and security was strong. As I headed to my car, he followed, ranting at me. Security swooped in and escorted him off the campus. They asked me a few questions. I told them honestly, and thus this put his license plate number on a watch list of sorts for them to watch out for. He showed up again a few weeks later after one of my late afternoon classes, standing by my car laughing. I noped and turned around to walk quickly away, and no brains Bob followed after running. The parking lot was full of people, so honestly, I didn't feel as scared as I should have been. He runs up to me saying to wait up, but again, I ignore him and walk faster. Eventually, he grabbed my backpack, pulled me to the ground with it. I honestly was in so much shock that I just sat there as people stared. Bob was yelling at me, saying it's my fault, that I'm a dumb bitch for not listening. About 2 minutes of this feeling like an hour. 2 large men and 1 skinny guy rushed up and told the guy to basically back off. I don't remember exactly what was said, but he ended up walking off. Campus security showed up soon after, escorted him again off the campus, and urged me to file a police report. I stupidly called my ex, telling him, and he drove up to campus, which was about a 30-minute drive. He convinced me not to file with the cops because he would lose custody of his daughter. No, seriously, I fell for that. Retrospect, Bob should have never been anywhere near children. After this, Bob started showing up at my job too, asked to be my customer. I had to explain to my boss why I couldn't serve him, to which Bob proceeded to say that I was a terrible person to my boss, and I only didn't want to serve him because I hated fat people, loudly and awkwardly, making all the customers uncomfortable. And too bad I'd given her a big tip, if you know what I mean. I would have rolled my eyes if I was actually genuinely scared. He came in 2 more times, causing a scene, enough for my boss to suggest that I find a different job because it was obvious this was becoming a problem. Then he was back to causing trouble for me at campus. But one night I stayed late at the library, working on my midterm project. That would be half of my final project. I stayed until they closed on Friday night, and that part of campus was absolutely dead on a Friday night. Everyone was usually at the dorms, sororities, or bars outside of the campus. Maybe 10 cars in the parking lot, usually packed so deep that people parked on the grass. As I leave the library, that's now closed, and turn the corner to my car, my stomach sank. His ugly chrome-rimmed green truck with racer stripes was right next to my car. I ran back to only find the doors locked behind me. Hoping that he didn't see me, I ran into the not-so-dense wooded area as I tried to collect myself, because I was in a full anxiety attack. But just as I start to calm myself, his green truck drives right up, and after a bit, he starts calling out. It was pitch dark, and I couldn't even whip out my phone, as I was terrified the light would give me away. He definitely saw me come around that corner. I just sat there behind this tree, trying to quiet my breath, and crying, which was near impossible, as I was having a real panic attack. After he turned off his truck, I knew the rumbling of his truck couldn't cover the sound of my panic attack, and I froze except for the massive shaking my body was doing on its own. I didn't think that I could move. At which point, someone walked out of the library, thinking that this was my chance. I held tightly onto the papers and ran for it. Now, I'm not a runner, but years of softball taught me that I sure could sprint. I ran to my car, started it, shaking like I was freezing. I drove nearly crashing a few times. As I drove off, though, he got into his truck and proceeded to follow me with high beams till I drove by campus police. I stopped my car next to it, and he drove off. I couldn't move. I just sat there crying and hyperventilating as the cop knocked on my window. I didn't even register it consciously. Eventually, he opened the door and asked me if I was okay. All I could do was shake my head no. My mouth was too busy trying to catch my breath from sheer panic. He called for an ambulance as I was in no shape to drive, and my panic attack grew worse as the police officer comforted me. I don't know if it was the relief of being safe, or the 6+ months of built-up of being unheard by my ex about my fears of his cousin. They gave me a shot in the ambulance to calm me down, as I soon realized why my panic was getting worse. I was having an asthma attack, first one in years, so I didn't even carry my inhaler with me. They realized way before I did. It wasn't just a panic attack. I failed to realize in my panic state that I was wheezing. After a full treatment, the police came into the cubicle that was shielded by curtains, but the general panic of the emergency room sounds were everywhere. I couldn't focus. I was hopped up on calming drugs and strong asthma meds that when they asked me questions, I just sleepily nodded honestly, barely understanding the questions. They sort of picked up on the fact I wasn't all there and told me that they would come back later. I soon fell asleep and woke up I don't know how long after with my ex and his dad as my ex. And his dad was my emergency contact in my phone. After the hospital got my insurance card, which was under my dad, I pulled out afterwards. The receptionist told me that I should really call my dad. So I did, at 4 o'clock in the morning. At first, he sounded angry. I was scared that he'd be super angry, but he soon said that he was on his way and hung up. After my dad showed up, his hate towards my ex and his dad was more than obvious, and begged me to come home with him right then and there. But my head was so messed up those days. I was scared of going back home because of so many reasons I conjured up, but honestly, in retrospect, I think I was most scared of being dumped by my shitty ex, and possibly being punished and or disappointment of my parents. I told my dad I needed to go back with my ex to pack and get my schoolwork. As I packed, though, my ex unpacked my stuff and threatened to rip any clothes that I packed and break my laptop. saying if I left that night that I would never see anything that I left behind again. Scared, I told my dad that I changed my mind, and this cemented the control my ex would hold over me for 6 more years. His tactics of making me stay would only get worse over the years. After 4 years, I wasn't even his girlfriend. He went on Tinder and dated, but refused to let me move out, sort of control. The police called me a few days after, but by this point, I had too much fear of my ex to press any charges. My ex and his cousin were both only children, and very close. I dropped out 5 months later after paranoia of looking over my shoulder all the time. Bob breaking my car window and leaving a dead raccoon in my car, I had enough of it. I became a shut-in. I barely left the house. I was too scared to get a job, and my life became fear. I gained weight, and my ex would only use that to further make me feel useless. I cried so much that I became numb most days. Too much shame and fear to reach out to my parents. After about 4 months of dropping out, Bob brings by his son to visit, proceeds to point at me and look at his son and said, "Mommy," in which his son goes, "Mama." I had no idea what to think, so I walked away, which made the kid cry. Then Bob proceeded to tell me what kind of bitch makes a little boy cry like that, in which my ex and his dad laughed. After an hour or so, he left. I presume brought the kid back to his mom or whatever, then came back to get drunk with my ex. That night, without detail that might get this post removed, left me absolutely broken. It happened at least 10 more times till my ex broke up with me, but refused to let me leave, in which I moved into one of the guest rooms and locked my door. I barely left that room for 2 years. I ended up eating very little because I couldn't get hungry, and was so depressed. Every time his cousin came over, I panicked. They'd get drunk and threaten me together, but luckily my ex was scared of his dad enough to not break down the door. One afternoon I was making food in the kitchen, trying to regain my strength mentally and physically, and Bob had slept the night over. He walked up behind me as I was cooking and started feeling me up. I rejected him, telling him to get away from me, in which promoted violence on his behalf, and I spare the details, but I needed stitches. They would both yell up a storm every time that they were together, till at the 6-year mark. I had enough. I packed everything I owned into garbage bags, threw them out the window at night, and then packed my car to the brim. Luckily, it was a hatchback. I drove around the town crying, even at times second-guessing myself if I should go back, even feeling kind of homesick. I was in a bad place mentally, but I got the idea to call up my older brother's best friend that I sort of dated in high school. He posted weeks ago he needed a roommate, and I asked if he still needed one. I moved in after a few nights of sleeping in my car. I still couldn't stand the idea after all this time moving back home, as my mom had completely lost herself mentally, and I couldn't return home knowing that I'd have to take care of her when I needed to heal myself. I lived with him on a year lease on very cheap rent till I met my now boyfriend. I got my certificate in IT and a job at wildlife rescue where my boyfriend is a wildlife biologist. And the scars began to heal. Though in therapy, pushing 30 now, I can honestly say that it's been a hell of a ride. I fell ill 2 years ago and can't volunteer in the field anymore, but I still help with fostering. My boyfriend bought a house from his family, and we live there fostering wildlife and strays alike to forever homes and re-releases. Though sick with a rare condition now, rare enough that it's identifiable, but it's a non-STD long-term virus my body can't fight off, so it would seem unlike others. I still manage to work from home these days and care for animals, and things are looking better than before. Mentally, I have plenty of hurdles to overcome, and physically, I'm in a lot of pain. But it's still so much better than any years previous to meeting my current boyfriend. One thing to say is that this was an online relationship. That's what the trigger was first of all. Do you guys remember Blockland? It was a game that I used to play a lot, and I had a best friend on there. I didn't get to talk to him in about 3 years, and then suddenly I get an email from him. He wants to talk to me again. I really missed this dude, and I was really emotional because of some family issues that had to be taken to court, child abuse and all that. So with me being the edgy 13-year-old that I was, I answered, We talked and talked, telling each other stuff and chatting up. Though a few days later, he admits that he has a big crush on me. With me being the emotional mess that I was, I said that I would date him. Wholesome so far. You start talking to an old best friend and fall in love, right? Not really. The first red flag I wish that I noticed is that he immediately wanted to roleplay with me like old times. Not like the creepy pets you type of thing. More the one where you actually write stuff out in detail. I agreed, and we both started roleplaying again. They immediately wanted to roleplay sex between our two characters, and told me all of his fetishes. Me being 13 and very emotional from trauma, I went with it. Soon, though, he wanted more than just roleplay. He wanted pictures. I was hesitant at first, but he pressured me into it. That was about the time that I was more realizing that I was a transgender male. I still am, but he refused to go by what I preferred. But I actually wanted a relationship, so I could feel loved. I forced myself to be a female, which made me super uncomfortable. He proceeded to pressure me into doing sexual things in the roleplay and send him nudes. It was some pretty weird stuff. Soon, though, after I found out he would not talk to anyone else but me, I told him to start talking to other people, which made this go downhill even more. I forced myself into this yandere girl nature because I thought that he liked it. Talking to his friends, I would threaten them around him. I would call him mine and mine only and all of that sort of stuff. Soon he started to get distant, not talking to me anymore. I'm pretty sure that he started talking sexual to someone else at the time. I remember that I went to visit my mom in the hospital, but I was so distraught because he kept telling me he needed a break and kept me from focusing on the fact that my grandmother was not okay right now, as she had surgery for a kidney stone. I thought hey, it's just not talking for a week or something. But he meant permanently. I was so desperate that I tried making things work, schedules and all that, but he refused. So then, after blocking him, a few months later, I got an email. Who is it from? It's from him. He explains that he feels horrible and tells me that he only used me for his sexual needs. I had stopped from being myself, forced myself into an oblivion of losing people that I cared for. Got depressed over this guy, just to learn that he used me. I wish I had known sooner. I moved to Florida last summer, and now can't forget this, as we probably live in the same state now. I can't go out without thinking about it, and I want to vomit. I did all this stuff for a guy that I thought loved me because I hadn't seen him in a while. He was 15 at the time, and in high school, while I was in middle school. Please, dude, I really don't want to ever fucking meet you again. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.